Hi there and welcome back to Lee's Play. Today we are continuing on with our beginner's tutorial for Tomb Engine and Tomb Editor. This is lesson 3 where we are going to be focusing on creating an outdoor jungle. In this we're really going to be looking at creating large outdoor environments and how to automate terrain manipulation using Tomb Editor to speed the process up. We're going to be doing an introduction to moving rooms on the y-axis, and we're also going to be looking at intermediate to advanced texturing techniques as we move towards building a temple and a tomb at the end of the jungle if you had played the Lost Valley, which we are recreating as our tutorial level. If you're following along with this tutorial, when you reopen your project, you should find yourself back here. So let's not waste any time at all and jump in and create a new room. Let's move the room over to the rest of our other rooms using the 2D map, and then we'll go back to 3D mode and let's connect the rooms together. So since we're recreating the Lost Valley, I'm actually going to shift to room east. I'm not quite happy with the positioning of that door portal, so let's remove that and go to our 2D map view and move it. Okay, so I think this works better for me because the Lost Valley kind of is like that. There's a lot more room over here than there is over here. Today we are creating a large outdoor environment. We're creating a jungle. Now, unlike everything else we've done up until this point, with an outdoor jungle, for example, it's pretty rare that we can fit the entire jungle onto this one room. It just simply isn't big enough. So in fact, our jungle is going to be comprised of several large rooms like this one, and we're going to have to break it down into chunks. With the Lost Valley level of Tomb Raider 1, it can be pretty much divided into 3 large rooms. The first room, which we're going to be working on now, is the infamous area with the bridge where the T-Rex first appears. The second large room would be the corner beyond the bridge where you would find the waterfall where you can go swimming. And the third large room of that map would be to the left of that area where you would find the outdoor temple. We just simply wouldn't be able to fit all of that into one room that we're looking at right now. I must admit, in Tomb Editor, if you go to the crop room button, you can actually add pixels to the room to, do it all in one go if you wanted to. Like if we do this, as you can see, the room has gotten bigger. However, if there's too many tiles on the map, it can be quite hard to manipulate in the 2D map area. So I'm going to not do that. I'm going to delete the room to reset it. We are going to divide it into 3 large outdoor areas, and also being able to divide the jungle area up into several rooms just gives you a bit more flexibility if you want to add more gameplay mechanics. For example, doors or other secret caverns and tunnels. It's much easier to do when the level is somewhat split up. We've created our portal as I've showed you many times in the previous 2 lessons, so I'm really going to assume that you're up to speed on everything I've done so far in the editor. The next thing I'm going to do is raise the roof because an outdoor environment would naturally have a large ceiling because we're outside, and obviously we want the sky to be up there. Now that the room is pretty much set up, we have it connected with a portal, we have our ceiling set to 20 as by the Y value. Let's start molding it to the best of our memory of recreating that Lost Valley area. Using set walls is a great way to kind of shape your jungle, even if you decide to resize the room at a later point. Using all the geometry techniques I've already shown you in previous lessons, what I've created so far has been this little cave area that just helps transition the inside to the outside. So this will all be painted with stones and rocks as Lara moves outside into the jungle. So I've done some basic molding of my first outside jungle area, so I have an idea of what it's going to look like so far. It has a really great transition as Lara makes her way out. However, each room you build should have some sort of objective or some sort of function. So for this area, we know this is where the iconic bridge is that Lara has to leap across eventually to collect a cog. So I know that by the end of this room, I sort of want to have that bridge area built out in terms of the environment. So let's go ahead and do that and build the bridge area. I'm going to raise it 16 tiles because I remember from playing the game that there was a really big leap across the bridge and how if you fell it was quite dangerous. So we probably want one end of the bridge to be here and maybe the other end of the bridge to be there. So Lara has to do a really large leap across the map. And in a later tutorial video, we're going to be placing those iconic bridge objects because obviously Lara can really only jump a 3 tile width. However, we want the bridge to look a lot more epic than that. So we will have a bridge hanging off of it that will allow Lara to grab both sides. So what I'm actually going to recommend is you have a 7 tile gap between where you kind of want the two kind of sides of the bridge to be. So it's going to look quite like that, and make sure they're both the same height. In this situation, I have them set to 16 tiles tall. And then since we know this is kind of our gameplay area, we're going to have a bridge here eventually, we can kind of start crafting our jungle around that. This will help it blend in better. From my memory of the Lost Valley, I remember there being a little waterfall here, so I might put one down just to add areas of interest on the map. We might even put a pickup there. Even though we haven't textured the area yet, you can really see that the jungle is starting to come to life and that we have a really great rocky environment for the exteriors. I'm actually going to do some sneaky platforming in this area of the map. If we remember, Lara has to do some platforming before she makes her way out onto the bridge. So we can actually cheat it a little, and rather than having to make another room, like a cave room to do that, there's absolutely no issue with doing that here. We can even drag the ceiling down because we can pretend that that's going to be the inside. Another area that I'm going to build on the map is, if you remember playing the Lost Valley, when the T-Rex comes out, there's actually an area beside the bridge where Lara can hide and shoot the T-Rex safely. Let's go ahead and make that area now. We want it to seem quite concealed, so I'm going to hide it. From my memory, there was also another waterfall there, so I'm going to put one down just as a landmark to add visual interest to the map, and maybe we can put a pickup or something there in a later tutorial. You know, in fact, we might even add a new area here. Why don't we pull this down and add 7 tiles so Lara still can grab it. Or maybe we can put a little block there just to make it look kind of more organic. And maybe we can add a pickup, we can add a secret area, but we'll do something with that in the future because obviously I don't want to just do a direct recreation of the Lost Valley, as this is a tutorial to teach you new things. And obviously Tomb Engine has a lot more features than the original 1996 game. We have created our first outdoor environment. We didn't do any texturing just yet, but I did put some waterfalls just to kind of give me some landmarks of where I want different things on the map to be. Because when you're creating a large outdoor environment or any large environment, you sort of want to plan where you want things to go. So in this situation, we know we want the bridge to be there, and we know where we want our waterfalls to be to add visual interest to the map. Up until now, when we created a room, we usually textured it after. However, because this is one large area, we should probably build out the rest of the environment first before we go ahead texturing it. So why don't we go ahead and rename this to Jungle Bridge. And let's work on the second room, which will contribute to the large outdoor environment. You should be really getting the hang of the 2D map by now. Let's raise the ceiling to match our other area. And then let's connect it all with a doorway. With the second area of the map, there isn't really a whole lot going on, but usually the corners of the Lost Valley were a great opportunity to put in secret passageways for secrets and other collectibles. What I'm probably going to do first is add a wall here because we know we want to close in this area because basically in there will technically be the inside of a cave before she makes her way outside. So we're going to put a wall there and then just sculpt around it to give the idea that we're building a mountain. Likewise, I'm probably going to put some walls here and then sculpt another mountain around this area too. I'm really happy with how that's looking because I can already imagine that when I'm in the level, that will look like a really great natural mountain range where there's a secret cave in there where we'll bring Lara Croft out onto the bridge. And I recall the waterfall had a secret cave on top, which we're going to build now. Again, you don't have to follow this exactly, but we want each room to have as much gameplay in it as possible because building is time consuming, so you do want to make it worth your while. In the first Tomb Raider, Lara was unable to crawl, but in this version we might have her crawl up the waterfall. Lara is actually able to shimmy on these types of surfaces. As long as they're not fully closed walls, she should be able to shimmy into the waterfall. The last landmark which I want to build in this area of the jungle is an overhang of stone that Lara can run underneath because it will add visual interest to the area as she makes her way to a temple. So I'm going to work on sculpting a mountain that comes out from underneath the ceiling. So these are the main landmarks of the second area of the infamous Lost Valley jungle. This area here typically tends to be filled with corridors that can either lead to other areas or it might be platforming areas for secrets. For this tutorial though, we'll stay pretty loyal to the Lost Valley, so I'm going to carve out secret areas using the same geometry skills I've shown you in this video and in the previous lessons. I made another lookout area here. Lara is going to be able to run in there to hide from the dinosaur and make her way into another cave and come out here. And obviously you can connect these two rooms with that cave with a series of doorways and portals. I'm pretty happy with how this is looking. This is the second of 3 areas in our large outdoor jungle environment. So if we just do a quick review, this was the first area where Lara will make her way out of the cave, and it will have the iconic bridge here before the dinosaur emerges. This is the second area of the map where we'll have the iconic waterfall. The main purpose of this second area is really just collectibles and secrets. We have natural rock formations to make a jungle environment, and we have our landmark here which will tell players that the temple is nearby. Let's call this area Outdoor Jungle Waterfall, as we do have a large iconic waterfall here. Finally, let's create the third area and place it beside the other 2, and this will be where the iconic temple is. As always, let's raise the ceiling and let's make a doorway. As I've shown you before, the first thing that I normally do in a new area is just continue on the geometry that connects the 2 rooms together, because we want the architecture to look the same to give the illusion that it is just one large outdoor environment. We don't want them looking crazily different. So now that I've finished off sculpting this little rocky stone mountain landmark here which Lara can run underneath, the main part of this area that we want to build out is actually the temple. The iconic temple which Lara can enter is where she finds the cogwheel that will help her complete the level. I'm feeling that maybe the temple should probably kind of be around here. That's kind of where the temple area is. Or maybe we can even move back a bit more. We do have a lot of room to work with in this situation. I think this looks like a good section for the temple. I'm going to make it 9 tiles in width and 4 tiles in length. And I'm going to pull down the roof just to give us an idea of that this is the temple. And I'm going to raise the ground as Lara has some steps she has to climb up of. I'm going to add some walls by using set wall as I showed you in the last tutorial, because these are going to be pillars for a temple. I may even move it in like that. I kind of want the roof of the temple to hang out beyond the pillars. I think that looks quite good to me. And then in the Lost Valley, some of the pillars are actually broken, so we're going to copy that. So this will make the temple look kind of destroyed and old, and it's like in ruins. I'm going to build some steps to the temple here. And as you can see, it really is the Lost Valley come to life. This is the large outdoor area. We got the bridge, we got the waterfall area, and now we have our temple area. And that was only done in 3 large rooms. So even though this is a beginner's tutorial, the Lost Valley is the sort of level you can make even if you are a beginner builder using Tomb Editor and Tomb Engine. It's very, very easy. One of my favourite parts of the temple in the Lost Valley is actually climbing onto the roof of it to collect some ammunition and some medipacks. So let's build some platforming around the temple, which will allow Lara to scale it. We know this is going to be where the roof of the temple is, so we know that our platforming section is probably going to be around here. I know that this will eventually be a cliff that Lara will be able to grab up and climb onto, so I'm going to kind of build everything around this base, because we kind of know from here on out Lara needs to kind of make her way up here. We're going to extend the ceiling in another part of the tutorial, which will allow Lara to grab onto this cliff, which will help her go onto the roof of the temple. So what I'm doing are platform blocks. These are more like for gameplay before we actually sculpt the mountains and the rocks around it. We want to make sure that we're building areas that Lara can actually traverse and climb. I'm going to put a trap here that if Lara falls, she's going to slide right off. So I'm really happy with how this section's looking because it doesn't look too inconspicuous. We kind of want to blend it in now so that the player kind of finds it as a surprise, which makes it a secret. However, since many of you have already played the Lost Valley, you of course will know this area very, very well. Okay, I think that's blended in quite nicely. I think once it's textured, it's just going to look like uneven mountains and terrain. And little do new players know that you'll actually be able to climb up onto the roof of the temple and collect some pickups. The last thing we kind of need to create in this area of the outside jungle is an area which will allow Lara to go into another secret cave, which will bring her out onto the iconic bridge. When you're creating large outdoor environments, it's a really good idea to plan it out on paper, what you want to achieve in a large outdoor environment, so you can keep track of everything. In this beginner's tutorial, it's quite easy because we're recreating Lost Valley, so we know where everything should be. But when you're creating your own original levels, or if you're not doing remakes, it's a really good idea to plan out what you want to achieve in every part of the map. Again, building and crafting these large areas are very time consuming, as you can see from this video. So you never want to build a large area that has no gameplay and essentially all Lara can do is run around in it because you're just making a walking simulator. You really want to make sure that every area has some form of gameplay, just so it's a really entertaining level to play and build. I think this could be a really great shout for an area which Lara can secretly climb up of to make her way into the cave. Now that I've built out the functions of what I want this last area of the outdoor jungle to be, like the other 2 areas, I'm now going to finish sculpting around the area to make the geometry look really interesting and visually beautiful. Now I have finished sculpting all 3 areas of the outdoor jungle, and as you can see, it looks really cool and epic. It's of course always a great time to save your level if you haven't done so, although I hope you're saving more frequently than that. While the area looks large and expansive and the rock formations do look impressive that surround the area, I'm not quite happy with the floor. As you can see, for the most part, these middle areas here are all flat. As you saw from the time lapse, even constructing all these rocky wall formations was very time consuming, and it'd be very time consuming to manually go in and adjust every floor tile to give it a natural looking aesthetic. However, with Tomb Editor, when it comes to the ground, you can actually get the app to automate it for you. What we're going to do is grab a selection of the ground in the middle and then go to transform, and let's do smooth random floor up. As you can see, immediately the floor is subdivided into a unique shape that makes it look like a more natural jungle environment where everything isn't perfect. I'm going to undo that, however, and change my selection. Okay, I think that looks a little better. As you can see, it looks a lot more natural. The ground looks a lot more uneven, and I think it will make it look a lot more believable. Why don't we do the same technique out here in this part of the jungle? As you can see, the ground is now starting to look far more interesting. Repeating this transformation process will increase the density of the randomness of the ground, and I don't want it looking too dense, so I'm going to undo it. So as you can see, the ground now looks a lot more uneven, a lot more dangerous, and a lot more like you would see in an unkept jungle that has grown with trees and rocks and stones. It really will look like the Lost Valley, and the geometry is going to be more interesting than the original 1996 game was. Don't forget to rename your room. In the last video, I showed you how to subdivide walls by selecting a wall and then pulling from the bottom and pulling from the top to split it into more even squares. A faster way to do this is using the transform tool to grid walls in 3, grid walls in 5, grid walls in 3, explicitly asking for squares, and likewise for 5. If you remember, I told you that a perfect square is quite like the floor, which is that it should be equal in width and height. And that's typically about 4 tiles being pulled in any direction. As you can see, a perfect square. All 3 of these outdoor jungle rooms, if you remember, I have asked you to raise the ceiling to 20 clicks total. That means if you divide 20 by 5, you will get 4, which is actually a perfect square. So what we're going to do is to use Control A on the keyboard to select every square on the map, go to transform, and let's create walls in 5 asking explicitly for a square. As you can see, with one command, the room editor system has done it for us, which will make it a lot easier than you manually pulling and pushing every wall tile. Let's go ahead and repeat the operation in every other room. Control A to select every tile on the map. Alternatively, you can use the 2D map and manually drag it yourself, but Control A will make sure you don't make any mistakes. And go to transform and grid walls. And then do it again for the final area. And as you can see, it's gridding the walls for us, which makes things a lot faster, just like how we randomly used terrain manipulation on the ground. Now we have a long task ahead of us of texturing the entire outdoor area. This may take you some time and you may not be able to complete it in one session. Now what I'm focusing on is the bridge area. As you see, I textured this large area rather fast because for the most part, the player is going to be running through it, not paying too much attention. However, for the bridge area, this will be a focus point because we know the player is going to have some gameplay in the area. So when you have large areas to texture, it's really important that you concentrate your efforts on parts of the area where your player is actually going to be spending more time. While you don't really want to be sloppy at all when it comes to texturing your levels, extra care and attention should be put in areas of the level you know your player is going to be spending a lot of time in. And because, if you remember, I wanted this area to be a cave, I might switch up my texture set to something more interesting. As you can see, I have now completed texturing the ground and all the walls. However, one area where I did not texture has been the ceiling, and we're not going to paint this in this tutorial. As we said before, this is outside. We are now in the outdoor jungle of the Lost Valley. So actually what we want here is the sky. And we're going to come back to this later. But for the moment, let's not texture it and move on to the next area. Now what we're going to do is texture the second area of our outdoor jungle. Remember to use the draw portals button that will allow us to see what the room beside it looks like. This gives us a good idea of what the textures look like, so as we texture this area, it stays consistent to that area. You might notice that the smooth ground we now have on the floor, some of these squares have been divided into triangles. You might notice that this might give you some glitches when you texture, when you're rotating your textures. We're going to cover triangles in another more advanced video, but for the moment, all you really need to do is texture over them. That said, you can kind of see what the engine's capable of, and it's more than squares. There are triangles too, and that will make our environments look even better. However, we're not going to be covering that in this beginner tutorial. We will cover that in a more advanced video. And now you have the long task ahead of you of also texturing this map. As I mentioned, areas of visual interest like this waterfall where the character is going to be exploring it, we probably want to make a better effort with textures. The last focus point of this map is this landmark here, which is this kind of stone mountain that Lara can run underneath. And then I'm going to finish texturing off this mountain range. just completed texturing the second of the 3 outdoor areas. As you can see, they all have a consistent art style, which is what we want, so it doesn't look like they're separate rooms. It looks like it's all one outdoor jungle. So now we're going to move on to the final area of the temple, and we're going to do exactly as before, first by matching up the areas together, by making sure that the textures in this room match up to the textures in this room. The added challenge of this room, however, is that we have our temple here. Up until this point, we've been texturing caves, tunnels, underground jungles and waterfalls, and just natural environments with stones and rocks. Temples and tombs actually require a different texturing approach, and that's because they're man-made, right? Like in ancient times, ancient civilizations created these temples and tombs. So actually your texturing approach is going to be quite different for a temple or a tomb. And what I mean by that is we actually have to be a lot more careful. So while you may consider an outdoor environment advanced, outdoor environments and natural environments are actually easier to texture because they can be more forgiving. Mistaken textures or bad patterns look a lot more unforgiving on a temple or a tomb than it does in a large outdoor environment. So first things first though, we're going to texture the outside environment before we texture the temple more carefully. I have just finished texturing all 3 areas like the other 2, and if you have done it right, the art style should really be consistent across all 3 rooms. Do feel free to go back, of course, and change the rooms as you see fit. For example, I had to go back to this inside of a cave here to add some extra textures that would match the stone on the outside. So do go back and make adjustments as you see fit. For example, I may come back later on and add a few more transition textures around the rocks like I've done in this area, which looks better than the texturing in that area. Up until now in the Tomb Editor, we really just focused on making caverns and tunnels and outside jungles, or even an underground waterfall cave. But the one thing they have in common is that they're all kind of natural environments. They're not man-made. With a man-made temple, however, texturing is a bit different in that if you texture it poorly, it can look really bad and noticeable. Large environments like these are a lot more forgiving. For example, if you repeat textures, also known as wallpapering, which I've mentioned in a previous tutorial, or if you slip up and make a few mistakes here and there. It's far less forgiving if you do it on a man-made environment like a temple or a tomb. So using our reference image, because we know what the Lost Valley looks like, let's start texturing this temple really carefully. What I'm really focusing on is not making mistakes when applying textures. Holding control on the keyboard gives me fine selection over picking my texture. Again, I am taking great care while texturing. And I'm going back and retexturing areas if I find better textures. I want to paint the trim of the ceiling in the temple, and I found a really good texture here. So again, holding control on the keyboard, I'm going to use this border as my texture, and I'm going to apply it around the trim. This level of detail can make your level really stand out and look beautiful. Again, it's far more noticeable if you make a mistake in this type of environment compared to natural nature environments. As you can see, a lot more care is being taken around this temple. So I'm really happy with how that's looking. I think that looks really, really good. As you can see, thoughtful placement of textures really do make a difference. So I'm really happy with how that's looking. I think it's really starting to come together. I'm really happy with how this temple is looking. The gap in the middle will obviously be the entryway into the tomb. And as you can see, it does just make a big difference, particularly when you're building more man-made environments like temples and tombs, that you do pay good attention when texturing. And that's why I'm calling this very intermediate to almost advanced, because the stakes are much higher if you make a mistake, in that it'll be very noticeable. So we've textured all of the outside jungle except for the ceiling. Now, because we want this to be outside, unlike everything we've done in previous lessons, this is our first outdoor environment, so we do not know yet on how to make this a horizon. Let's go back to the first outside area, which was the jungle bridge. Let's just turn off portals so we can focus on one area at a time. To turn this into an outside environment, because if you've play tested this so far, you might notice that this is pitch black. It's a black void. Well, we need to turn that into a sky or horizon. That's pretty simple to do. The first thing we need to do here in room options is enable skybox. Now, because this is an outdoor jungle and it's a really large open area, we would also maybe like Lara's hair to blow in the wind. That's also easy to do by pressing the wind box. The last thing we need to do now is select a special type of texture that when you go outside, this turns into sky. In the texturing tool panel, you're going to notice one with an eye with a cross through it called invisibility. Let's press that and apply it to the ceiling, which will result in this grey colour. While you may be tempted to go to textures and ceiling, don't forget that we also built an underground cave in this part of the area, so we want to make sure we do not lose this texturing that we've done. So a tool you can use is grid paint, that when you apply it, it will actually texture faster. It'll do it in 2x2 increments, and that can just speed up your process for you. Finally, let's go back to brush and just fill in those last little areas. Let's press a new button inside of Tomb Editor called Draw Horizon. When you press it, you now get a preview of what the room looks like with the sky turned on. Obviously the horizon has a house and a temple in the background, so it's not the perfect fit for Lost Valley, but I'll be showing you how to change the horizon and many other things in a later tutorial. But for now, this is perfect. Let's turn off horizon and let's move into the next area and do the same thing. Let's move our camera towards the ceiling. Let's make sure invisibility is selected, and to speed things along, let's use grid paint and let's texture this area with the ceiling to invisibility. And then let's use our brush to fill in the other tighter spots. You can use Draw Horizon with combination of Draw Portals to see what the entire outdoor area is going to look like once you have the sky turned on. Let's move into our final area and repeat the process, making sure not to paint the ceiling of the temple. We only want to paint the ceiling of the area which we want to make the outside. Don't forget to enable skybox and wind in all outdoor area rooms. And double check all of them are enabled in every outdoor area. So after all that time, we created a large outdoor jungle for Lara to roam around in, and eventually it'll be filled with puzzles, traps, dinosaurs, and many other pickups. Now that we've completed building the outdoor jungle, and you should be very familiar with now geometry and texturing, let's go ahead and quickly build the temple itself. So I've just built the basic shape of the temple. There's quite a big drop down from when Lara enters it from the outside. Up until now, something that we might do is raise the ceiling of the temple like this. However, we're going to try something different. What we actually want to do is raise the actual position of the room to match up with the entrance of the temple here. Make sure your portals are drawn so you can see the outside of your temple and the inside. Rather than changing the ceiling or the floor, we're actually going to move the position of the room by pressing this button here called Move Room Up. As you can see, the room is physically moving, but it's not changing size. Feel free to have a play around and see how you can manipulate it. Now, if we look at it from the outside, Lara would have to climb her way in, or if we bring it back down, Lara will drop into the temple. I'm going to raise it up about this much so that Lara has a normal walking step into the temple. As you can see, again, this is another reoccurrence of paper thin walls. As you can see, there is no thickness between these two portals. So what we're going to do is set a wall here to avoid this visual glitch. Another thing I'm not happy with is how the portal has distorted my trim texture there because the portal is now too large. So what I'm going to do is go back into this room and pull down the ceiling. I could change the texture, of course, on the outside, but instead I might prefer to do that instead. As you can see, there's a subdivision. To remove a subdivision from the ceiling, press the R or F key to bring it up or down respectively. I'll explain hotkey subdivisions on a wall in a future tutorial video, but for now just use R and F to get rid of that. I'm going to continue building out the temple by putting in the pool of water. So now that I have a basic idea of what I want my temple to look like based on the Lost Valley, I'm going to go ahead and texture it using every trick I've shown you up until this point. I have divided the walls equally as I've shown you earlier in the tutorial when you were doing the large outside area, and now I'm just going to texture it in. Finished texturing the inside temple. Obviously we haven't added the actual pool of water yet, but as you can see, we've really accomplished a lot today. Why don't we go ahead and test our level to see everything we had built today. So as normal, you are going to vault your way up this cavern and then climb down into the Lost Valley. As you can see, it looks really good in Tomb Engine and Tomb Editor. The high resolution textures look far sharper than the original Tomb Raider game. And we have a horizon and sky. As you can see, up in the sky it's pitch black. In the future, I will show you how to add moving clouds to make the level look even better. But as you can see, we created today a really large open outdoor area. As I've mentioned before, when you're texturing out in large outdoor areas, it can be quite forgiving because nature textures like grass and rocks and stone naturally look imperfect. But as I mentioned before, when you start building temples and tombs themselves, extra attention and care is needed when texturing so that the players have the best experience possible when they're playing your level. As you can see, these are textured perfectly with no imperfections, and you can tell. I think this is looking really good. The textures are looking really sharp, and as you can see, building upon the techniques you learned in the previous tutorial videos, your texturing should get much better, making you able to build rooms and texture them like this. To quickly recap what we learned today, we learned about how to create large outdoor environments and automating terrain manipulation using the Tomb Editor. I've shown you a quick introduction on how to move a room on the Y-axis with this temple there using the Move Room button up or Move Room down button. I've also gone over more intermediate to advanced texturing with the temples and tombs. By now, you should have a really good grasp on the Tomb Editor and Tomb Engine. I know this was a long video, but I hope this really helped you achieve your vision for what you want to create with a Tomb Raider level editor. As always, if you feel your texturing techniques have improved, I do implore you to go back to the previous rooms you've built in earlier lessons and retexture them with your newfound skills. If you enjoyed watching this video, do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for future tutorials for Tomb Engine and Tomb Editor. I hope you guys are keeping safe and well, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.